To kick it off, for those people that don't know who you are, which I'm sure is few people in the marketing space, do you want to give a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, I'm Brian Dean. I started a site called Backlinko about 7 years ago that taught people white hat SEO, still teaches people white hat SEO. And before that, I had built a bunch of affiliate websites and kind of learned SEO through doing that and basically learning from failing. And I built Backlinko as a way to sort of teach people what I learned along the way and also to create the blog that I wanted to read. Because back then, and even still today, there wasn't really a lot of like actionable information about SEO. And I wanted a blog that would be like, do this, do that. Here's the steps. Here's a strategy you can try. And there really wasn't anything out there. So I created Backlinko to fill that gap. And since then, yeah, it's been great. The site has been really successful. We get about 500,000 unique visitors a month. The email list is about 200,000 people. So yeah, it's a good it's a great business. And recently, earlier this year, I started a site called explodingtopics.com, and that's a database of topics that are growing in popularity. And
I saw
yeah,
that.
it's been fun to work on.
Why start that? What was the thinking behind it? The new business?
Well, I actually acquired it from somebody.
Okay.
So that made the process a little bit easier.
was there what was the opportunity that you saw though?
Well, I think the opportunity I saw was that there's a million keyword research tools, like just bajillion of them. And they all basically do the same thing. You type in a keyword and you get a list of suggestions. And they tell you the search volume, the competition, the cost per click, every metric you could even come up with, they have. But there really wasn't a good source for browsing topics, because the problem I have with keyword research tools is that you had to already kind of know what you were looking for. Like if you typed in blue shoes, the suggestions would be like blue tennis shoes, blue soccer shoes, the same stuff. Yeah. I was like, I want to go to a place. I don't even know what I want. I just know a category and just tell me what to write about. And I saw this guy had built this site called trend.co. And I was like, this is perfect. This is kind of exactly what I had in mind, but light years beyond what I imagined. And I was like, okay, dude, let's team up and build this thing together. So acquired it in October, and we relaunched it in December. So that's what I've been working on for about half of my time now is on that.
Did the site,
from what I know now, right? Like I'm on the list, is you subscribe and then you get the week or I don't know how often it comes, but a list of like this week's exploding topics, right? And you guys give a little bit of a description of each one.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's a newsletter that we call Exploding Topics Tuesday that just hit 50,000 subscribers. And that's
what?
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's quick.
Fast, man. It's been amazing. I know, it's been amazing. It's one of those things where it was like almost none. And then what actually kicked us off was Kevin Kelly recommended it in his newsletter. The guy who started Wired magazine. It was like thousands of subscribers. It was crazy. I've never seen anything like that in my whole life of marketing. It was just like nothing. Wow. And then
did you do anything to get it in there? Or?
No, I wanted to email and just be like, how'd you find out about this? Like I had so many questions, but it was cool. So so the newsletter is basically the best topics. It's a curated list of the best topics, because on the site right now, there's 3,000 topics. And some of that, we try to do a good job of curating topics as opposed to fads. So fads are, things that'll last like a week or a month. We're looking for things that have some legs. And the newsletter is a breakdown of the best topics from that week, and also other related topics and why we think the topic is growing and some other opportunities around that topic. And yeah, that's actually been a huge growth engine as a newsletter, because every time we send it out, people forward it around and get more subscribers that way. So it's kind of like a network effect, but with an email, which is as old as you can get for a network effect, but it still works.
Other than him featuring you, how did you start growing that list?
We had a product hunt launch on day one. That was huge. We were product of the day and the month. So I've never done anything on product hunt, so I had no idea what to expect, but it was good. We got a couple thousand subscribers in that week. And since then, it's been mostly, we do a little Facebook ads, but it's been mostly the tool. People share the tool organically and dark social. And our Twitter has been like a surprising hit in terms of growing. So it's one of those things, man. I had no idea what would help it grow. I would have never guessed in a million years, like Twitter and the newsletter would be two biggest growth levers. But so far it is, which we're just starting. I mean, the blog is like 2 months old, trying to grow that with, but you know how it takes a long time. I'm spoiled with Backlinko. I'm used to just like putting something out there and it ranks like right away. With this thing, I'm putting it out. It's not even gonna get like indexed right away. So it's been a little bit of growing pains from that point of view.
Davish, maybe that's a good place to start, because I know one of the questions we had is just about growing a site from scratch and how it's different than growing a site that's been around for a while. Maybe talk through some of your thinking on what it's like doing SEO for a site that's brand new, and maybe if there's any strategies or tips that you think are valuable there.
Yeah, so let me give Brian some context. We have our course right now. The course part of the community is based on like our experience in the agency with certain business archetypes. And right now we have 3, and the whole course portion is built around case studying those 3. B2B SaaS, but it's like generally assumed to be like lower-ish price self-serve, like you sign up for, free trial or whatever. Then high-priced B2B service, and you could lump in like really high-priced enterprise SaaS, like 100K contract. Those are the long lead time type businesses, right? Like long sales cycle businesses. And then B2C, which in this case, we're doing like a growth mentor, which is like a marketing community, but things targeting consumers. If we look at the first 2, and growth mentor can kind of be lumped from an SEO strategy into maybe the first one, in that SaaS one is assume in those businesses, typically there is a keyword landscape. There are people searching for things like the thing. There are people searching for competitor alternatives. There's sort of like keyword opportunities. Whereas the B2B high price service, there may be less. Like for example, we have some marketing agencies, and there's some bottom of the funnel keywords like SaaS marketing agency or something. You take Grow and Convert itself, like content marketing agency. But after that, like what else are you going to go after, right? So then it has to be a much more longer term, what we call like pain point based like discussion, right? How to discussion. So let's start with that first one. Is I'm curious, and I think a lot of the people in our community, because we know our clients also ask that, are going to have this question, is they're starting from a place where they don't have a ton of momentum. And these are like even just either founder, like solopreneur businesses, but a lot of them are like established businesses. And the person in our community or taking our course is like a marketing manager, it's VC backed or whatever. But despite that, their main growth engines have typically been like outbound sales team and like a paid channel. And content has just been, the blog has been this random mix of like, we'll publish this random thing here, and like maybe we tweet it out, and then like here's a product update, and then there's no like concerted strategy. And obviously our course is meant to help that, but I'd love to get these outside perspectives and see, like, especially if we disagree, and have that be a discussion. Like, so say, you're in, or you're being a consultant for, some like SaaS product on like the $100 to $200 a month with a free trial type software. The blog, like I said, is just this random amalgam of stuff. How do you think about bringing that in? And the last thing I'll say is one of the biggest pain points that our readers have told us is, what I'm tired of, what I can't do is bring in the right customer. So I can get random traffic, but it's like, I want qualified traffic that converts. And that's like a big issue, is where do I find those people, like our actual customers? I'm curious how you think about strategizing, how you would think about strategizing in the beginning.
There's a lot to unpack there, but I think in general, the strategy for that site is not that different than a new site, because all that stuff they did before is basically nothing. So it's the same as starting from scratch, in my opinion. So unless they're already getting traction with something. So it's like, I look at it as 2 different strategies in one. The first strategy has to be getting the word out about the site. Like, if content marketing just to get eyeballs, just to get traffic, just to get links, just to get buzz, just to get people to know you exist.
Interesting.
Because a mistake a lot of people make is they're like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We have this site no one's ever heard of. We're gonna create a bunch of keyword optimized content and then wait for it to rank, which in theory works, but it doesn't in practice, because no one's linking to the site. No one even knows it exists. So you don't get that flywheel going. You're just putting content into the ether and thinking, if I make it long tail enough or low competition enough, it'll rank. Usually doesn't happen in practice. So in my experience, the number one thing needs to be putting the site on the map, what can you create in terms of content that will put you on the map? Is it an industry study? Is it a survey? Is it a ridiculously long list post? Is it a case study? Is it like maybe an opinion piece sometimes can work? Like, is it a free tool version of your SaaS product? Like, it has to be something that puts you on the map. That's going to start getting you the links and a little bit of flywheel momentum. Then from there, on the back of that, you can start creating the keyword optimized content that you can rank for. So I would look at it as a two-pronged strategy, and I would put the putting on the map first, because without that, the keyword stuff's not probably going to work.
That's interesting.
Is there anything? Yeah, that is really interesting.
Well,
it's kind of opposite to our approach, but I'll let you go, David.
Yeah, well, it isn't. It isn't. So what we do on the agency and what we talk about in the course. Yeah. So I think in Brian's assumption, he's 100% right, because he said, look, I'm assuming that all that stuff that you mentioned is worthless. It's worthless from a lead perspective. He's also saying, so I'm going to treat it like a news site. For a news site, that's absolutely true. Like a brand new site is like domain authority 0, new WordPress install, for example. And then you need to build some like link authority to do that. In our practice, we actually start with the keyword optimized content. Why are we getting away with it and getting results? I think two things. One is, in practice, Brian's talking about a hypothetical, and like there's a spectrum. And so a lot of our clients, they do have like like an older domain, and they have some like authority there. And so we're able to rank. Number two is we do like link building. We have a link building agency, and I think they just do the standard sort of like guest posts on various sites or whatever, including link building. So it's strategic to like certain pieces of our content. What we're experimenting with, even on our agency side, is what Brian, I think, mentioned, which is instead of like publishing a post and then being like, I'm going to do some guest posts to drive a couple links to that post, is first have these link building assets, right? These things that get a bunch of links, and then do your keyword optimized content later, right? And
yeah, exactly. Or I mean, it's like you do both always. Like it's never, you're never okay.
It's not one or the other.
Yeah, but in terms of a process, I would definitely focus on that first, and then worry about the keyword stuff later. But yeah, if a site is like has been around for 15, 20 years, it's just going to pick up links because the CEO spoke at a conference once, and whatever. Yeah. But in terms of like having legit domain authority, that's going to be, you can put out a keyword optimized piece of content and it ranks. That's where I think that first piece comes into play, and it's kind of an underrated part. For that, I wouldn't even worry about SEO, wouldn't even worry about keywords. Like, the goal is really just to get something that's worth
create something really interesting.
Yeah, but of course, if the site already has some domain authority, there's nothing wrong with creating a few keyword optimized these pieces and putting them out there.
I have a few questions to dig into that a little. Is there a certain amount of domain authority that you think is like the minimum before you can really get a site to start ranking for keywords?
That all the time.
Yeah, I think there is. A lot of people are going to be like, it depends, but and it does depend on but it depends on your industry more than anything.
For
it's
sure.
Not one of those stupid, it depends on, Google uses 200 ranking factors, and yeah, they do. But if you don't have domain authority, good luck ranking. Like, I don't care what else you do, it doesn't matter. So it depends more on your industry. So instead of like pulling a number out of my butt, what I would say is look at the other sites in your niche, and that's your benchmark. Like, you don't have to get to where they're at, obviously, like, or else I would have never started Backlinko, because I started and everyone had domain authority 100 on day one. So, but if you have, let's say everyone's 40 and you're at 15, if you can get to like 25, you're in the same ballpark, because, domain authority isn't like a scientific number, no matter what the SEO tool companies have you believe. From Google's point of view, they're not like, oh, this is 25, this is 40. If you're in the same sort of range, it's basically the same. And then that's where the other stuff comes into play, like user experience signals and links directly to that page and the anchor text and things like that. So I would say if you have if you're about half of your competitors, you're in the range where you can start probably ranking for stuff near them. And obviously the closer you get to the domain authority and surpass it, you're going to do a lot better.
Yeah. And is that domain authority in your mind is, my understanding, and I don't know a lot about this, you might, is these tools, Ahrefs, Moz, and all that have their own like number, is it's primarily just a function of backlinks. Is that true?
It's
or
100%
not?
a function of backlinks.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't look at anything else. So it's basically how many links you have, but not just that. It's also the authority of the sites that link to you. So it's just like PageRank from back in the day. If you got a lot of links from, low quality sites, it's not really going to raise the domain authority that much. But if you get a couple links from high authority sites, it's going to raise it a lot. But yeah, it's one of those numbers that I think even they, like the SEO tool companies, would admit it's not perfect. It's not like a gold metric. It's not something that Google would use. What they use is way more advanced and way more involved than what they use. But it is a good indicator of like, this is probably going to correlate with rankings. So, we analyzed 11 million search results earlier this year. One of the things we found, that domain rating and Ahrefs correlated with rankings. And it just makes sense. Like and especially today, Google wants to show authoritative sites from trusted sources. Like they're really worried about showing people bad information and untrustworthy information. And domain authority is one of their shortcuts to be like, okay, this site has a high domain authority. It's probably more trustworthy than some random person's site that has no links.
How do you think about building links to the site overall versus specific pages that you're trying to get to rank? Is there some sort of balance there? Are you more focused on just building the overall site authority, or what's your thought process?
Yeah, to give you some background on that, we were having internal debates about that exact question of like, can we do what you're saying, which we've internally just been called like build a link building asset, have that be the source of the recipient of the backlinks, and then just maybe do some internal links to our specific blog posts that are like conversion intent keywords? Or does that, and then we're sort of wondering, does that matter? And is there a pro and con versus building a link directly to this keyword optimizer conversion specific blog post?
Yeah, I mean, it's always better to get a link directly to the page you want to rank. So if you could choose, it's much better to get a link directly to the page. That's one of those in theory versus practice things. But in practice, you have a page like our product versus product Y, or another competitor's alternatives, or best X software. Who would link to that? Why would they link to it? It's not even that. How could you make that amazing enough to link to? And it's super biased because you wrote it. Of course, the best X software is going to be that company's on the list, obviously. So it's more about a practical thing, that type of content that's keyword optimized, usually it's good for a user, but it's not something that someone's going to rush to link to, which is why you have to create these linkable assets. Like in a perfect world, you wouldn't even have to make these things. You would just put out keyword optimized content and people would link to it. But in practice, it doesn't really work. And I've seen countless times where sites have created like a couple linkable assets that have done well. They link to all their important pages from there, and that's all they need. And they crush it with that.
Yeah, that's actually one of the strategies that we've been talking about internally as well. So going back to your thinking in the beginning about creating some link asset at the beginning, if you get a bunch of links to that asset and then you link out to the pages from that asset that you want to get to rank, that's beneficial.
Oh yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, those
And
internal links, how we've heard different things, but most SEO folks, including consultants on our team, have said internal links are by like lay people extremely underestimated, and they have like extreme clout, like in terms of getting the stuff that has the most backlink profile on your page internal linked to the rest of the stuff. I don't know if your experience has been similar. Or...
Yeah, they're definitely powerful. I think even if you didn't internal link, I think the strategy would still be helpful because it raises your overall domain authority. Okay. And the link authority has a way of finding their way to the page anyway. So like you have a linkable asset, and then you have a link to your homepage and navigation, and the authority goes there, and then it goes to your blog, and then it goes to one of the keyword optimized posts. So it still kind of makes its way there, meandering. But obviously, internal link is better because it goes directly there. So internal links work better because it funnels things directly where you want it. Like you're in control for the first time. Like with links, you usually have no control over like where the link points to on your page, what anchor text do you use, all these, where it is on the page. With internal link, you can control that stuff. But also more importantly, I think, is that the anchor text you use, if you use it enough, it really tells Google this page is about this thing. And this is the most important page about this thing on our site. It sends a strong signal that way. So I think it's helpful in two ways. So yeah, your team is 100% right. The only rub is a lot of people internal link randomly. The way you described it, Davish, is perfect. You have that a page with a lot of links, and then you funnel it strategically to pages. What a lot of people do is just internal link all over the place. Just throw internal links like confetti and be like, I internally linked, it's great. But the key is really to internal link one way. You want to push the authority in one direction and not have it necessarily go all the way around.
Got it. Actually, this brings up a couple points that are really interesting that we've been testing. So putting blog posts on a homepage, and I'm guessing it's for the same reason, because most sites get a majority of their links to the homepage. We've seen that if you put, let's say, a few blog posts that you're looking to get to rank for a specific keyword on the homepage, it has a boost in rankings. And I'm guessing it's because of the same reason you're saying here. If you're funneling link juice, I guess, to specific pages from something that has a lot of links, that helps.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously usually the best page to do it.
Got
The
it.
problem is conversion rates. It can hurt conversion rates. That's the reason that sites don't usually do it. But yeah, in terms of if SEO was like your goal and you're like, no one's searching for this product anyway, we need to rank these other keyword pages, which happens a lot, then that's a really good strategy.
And before we get off the topic of just these link assets, I want to know how you think about promoting them. So let's say you're to create one of these surveys or anything. Are you still using Skyscraper as the main technique, or do you have other things that you're doing now?
There's other things that I'm doing. So I don't think the Skyscraper technique in that way works as well, just because it's kind of played out. We've all received.
You blew it up too much.
The only thing I wanted to ask Brian is like how you feel. So the Skyscraper.
My bad on that. Yeah, it's my fault.
It sucks when you write about good strategies and everyone copies them and then they don't work anymore.
That's why I don't do it. That's why I keep the best stuff in the course now, because it's so like our course is on the higher end, so we don't get that many students every time we launch, and they're all in different industries and stuff, so it doesn't get played out. I've just seen the difference between publishing something on the blog and like instantly getting abused, and then something in the course and like for years people aren't even talking about it. So it's great. But yeah, I think I wouldn't just Skyscraper and be like, I created this, you created this thing, I created something better. But what still works that's just as old, if not older, is broken link building. I just did a broken link building campaign for Exploring Topics, and I made sure not to send it as me. I had my co-founder, Josh, who no one knows, send all the emails. And that way there was no bias, and it killed it. We basically looked for dead resources that were similar to our stuff, sent people really targeted, nice, friendly emails, and that was it. And people replaced it. It wasn't like 100% conversion rate, but it's one of those strategies that it'll always work because you're making that person's page better. Like I have a page of the 50 best keyword research tools, let's say, and three of them are dead. You're like, hey, these 3 are dead. Here's one that's a good replacement. Or I have a thing about like 50 resources for startups, and you guys just publish like, the first 10 steps for SEO for startups. And if 2 of theirs are dead or 1 of theirs is dead and yours is a one-tone replacement, it just makes logical sense they would add it. You don't need to do any arm twisting or crazy stuff people have done lately with Skyscraper, like following up 100 times or any of that nonsense. It's just like a legit, it makes their page better. And at the end of the day, that's what outreach should be. And that's what the Skyscraper technique was actually. It was like, you have this resource page that links to this thing. Here's a similar thing that's better. When you add it to the page, it wasn't ever to replace the original link. It was to add it to a resource page. That was the goal from the first place. And then it got kind of like bastardized, out of control, and
people didn't make it better. They just sent worse content.
yeah, that was the other thing. They didn't even make it better. And if you saw in the original case study from 2013, I mean, the original versus the one I made was night and day. Like the Google ranking factors post they had versus mine, that took hours and hours and hours. Yeah, people are just creating something similar, calling it better in their opinion because they're biased. They made it, of course, it's better. And then blasting out random emails. I was also emailing people in Gmail one by one by one, like replying to people with questions. There was no software automation.
Yeah, now we get those Skyscraper emails and there's literally an unsubscribe link at the beginning. I'm like, how did I never subscribed to this list.
I had the best one yesterday about adding some resource about manufacturing to our blog, like completely just missed on mail merge or it's all the tools, because I still think a lot of the strategy works. I think part of the issue that I see is people are just trying to take shortcuts. They're not it's again what you're saying. The whole strategy was about creating a better resource, something more valuable, and then sending personal emails, doing the research, and like people just aren't willing to put in the time.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. You're absolutely right, man. I get that question all the time. What outreach software should I use? I'm like, well, how many outreach emails do you send a month? Well, I haven't sent any yet, but I was like, no, send one via Gmail and see what happens. Then send 2, and then send 5, and then send 10. And then when you're like, I can't handle this anymore, then there's a place for an outreach software. But people go with the outreach software first, and then, dude, that's how you burn so many bridges too. People don't realize, like, especially like we were saying before, it's a small world. You'd be surprised how many people you piss off when you send them like 100 generic emails and follow up 87 times. I can't tell you how many tools that I won't review and I don't want to talk about because they just bug me with emails. And yeah, so it's a scorched earth strategy. But if you just create something amazing and find places where a link to that resource makes that page better, makes that site better, it's hard work, but it's a no-brainer that they're going to add it.
What kind of conversion rate from a broken link building campaign do you think is reasonable? Is that even a good question to ask? Like,
yeah,
we're talking about like 5% of emails.
Yeah, it's about 5%. If you're like, it depends so much on, I mean, like I said, I don't want to give it depends answer because I'm getting sick of those because they're not really answers. So it's about 5 to 10%. So I should say, instead of it depends, it'll increase if what you created is really close to the dead link. So for example, let's say someone has a link in a blog post, like 44% of people named Davish are really handsome. It's probably underestimating actually. But that resource is dead. And you did a study that found that like exactly the same thing, or 45%, you could be like, oh, here's a link that can add, that's a replacement. That's a simple, logical, one-to-one replacement. The conversion is going to be really high. If you have something that's like, well, I have that resource is dead, but I have something similar about, all about people named Davish, the conversion rate, people might try to find a way to add it, but it'll probably be more like 5 or 4%. So that's the number one thing, and is how close it is to the dead resource. In fact, a lot of ninjas, like link building OGs and stuff, what they do is they will find an archive.org version of it and try to recreate it as close as possible on their site without plagiarizing. That way, when they outreach, they know that they have a good replacement because it's literally similar to what was there.
So I want to ask about phase 2, right? Brian said like 2 phases on that question, and we've been on phase 1, but I have one more kind of thing to continue this thought process. One thing we've noticed, especially for one of our clients that we're going to talk about publicly, and this is in the course anyways, fine, is Cognitive FX, the concussion treatment center in Utah. They do some badass stuff on concussions that no one else does. When we started with them, we were like, oh man, here, like, let's see, because like we're going up against like WebMD and like Healthline and Mayo Clinic, right? For these like concussion related keywords. We've been killing it. And like we didn't do any link building asset creation. We just went straight like for what we call pain point SEO, which OG SEOs would probably just call the long tails, right? And one hypothesis we have, and I wanted to get your perspective on this, is that we think you take WebMD versus our concussion clinic in Utah that like no one's ever heard of, like online, right? Our client is, for a concussion term, is there something that you think in the Google algorithm where they know this site is all about concussions, so I'm going to prioritize it over WebMD, which is just about anything medical? Is that like, and so
yeah, 100%. I would like to call it domain authority because it's like your authority in a domain, but it's obviously that term is taken. But it's basically that. I think it has less to do with what your site is about versus how other people see your site, and if other people see your site as trustworthy about that topic. Because anyone can create a site about concussions and be like, I'm only about concussions, and therefore my concussion stuff will rank. But from Google's point of view, they see your client as a trustworthy source about concussions.
How?
Well, they must have some links, or they don't have any links at all.
I wonder if it also has to do with the way that we produce the content, though, because every single article that we're creating for them is an interview with a doctor that has a specialty on concussions. And I'm wondering if there's some sort of way that Google can just tell that that the expertise in the article is better than, let's say, a WebMD that's just generic kind of content. It's templated.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's
What
the
do you
EAT
think
stuff,
about that?
right? You know, the expertise, authority, trustworthiness. So yeah, it's probably an element of that. I think there, like you said, Benji, there's the EAT stuff, which is a particular piece of content is like, wow, this was written by an expert and they know the space really well. And their LinkedIn is, you know, concussion expert, and then they've been published as a concussion expert, and that stuff can trickle down to the site. And then, like David's saying, the site specializes in that. And other people, when they discuss a site, discuss it in the context of concussions. So all that stuff adds up. Like I've seen with Backlinko, to give you an example, I've been publishing stuff about SEO and YouTube for a long time, and it ranks well because offsite people talk about the stuff that I publish from SEO in my YouTube channel. But whenever I publish something kind of off topic, like email marketing, it doesn't tend to do as well, even though everything else on the surface is the same. Like the domain authority is the same, going after low competition keywords. It's like Google knows, you know, this guy is not an email marketing expert, even though I like to fashion myself as one. People the internet doesn't agree with me because I never get mentioned in that context ever. And Google is smart enough to see that and say, well, you might think you're like Mr. Email Marketing, but you know, the internet doesn't think so. Therefore, we're not going to rank you for that. I don't think it's as simple as that, but I've seen it too many times where it's like this site all of a sudden gets known for this thing and all the rankings go up for that thing and not for the other thing. Yeah, it's definitely a ranking factor.
Let me give some context that I think Brian is skipping over because he knows that I want to make sure anyone watching this video on our side knows, is that Google has, their algorithm has this whole LSI kind of AI machine learning thing where if there's a link, in this case, Backlinko is being linked on like YouTube SEO related stuff, or the previous example, our concussion client is being linked to from other sites around concussion stuff. Am I correct, Brian, in that Google's technology now is looking at not just the anchor text of that link, but the like surrounding context and words around that? And that's how they figure out, everyone, like a lot of people are linking around concussions to this Cognitive FX site, or a lot of people are linking around and discussing YouTube SEO to Backlinko, and therefore Backlinko has authority in that kind of space because they're looking and reading more around the linking site than just the anchor text. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's a big part of it. There's also, I think, an entity element too, that when they associate two entities together, they tend to rank well together. So for example, with your client, every time that their business gets mentioned online, people are talking about concussions around it. And they start to tie those things together and boost your authority for that topic, and therefore you'll rank more for it, because not only are they getting linked to, even when they're not getting linked to, just people are associating the two things together, and it strengthens that association in the eyes of Google.
So then that has implications from a content strategy perspective for anyone watching this, right? Is that your link asset, if it's closer to, the closer it is to the specific topic of what you're like buying keywords you want to rank for, what we call like the bottom of the funnel pain point keywords, the better, right? Because then you're going to get, from those links, you're going to get that topic association.
Yeah, if you can swing it. I mean, if you sell like some boring manufacturing part in a factory, then it's going to be tough. Or you're like a B2B SaaS that does some boring analytics thing that one cares about. Yeah, but you're right, dude. The closer you can get it, it's just good for your brand anyway, because then those people that find your content, even the link piece through like social media, they're going to be customers. So, but I'm talking about, unfortunately, that in most cases, you kind of have to stretch a little bit to these shoulder niches with your linkable asset outside of what you do and what you sell.
Yeah. Okay, so then moving on to the 40 minutes later to the keyword strategy. So say you did this for this SaaS company, right? So let's actually make this concrete so that we know. So let's call it a like CRM for SMBs. So some niche version of a Salesforce competitor, of which there are 4,000, right? So we target like, I don't know, dentist office, or I don't know, it doesn't matter who we target. So small startups or something, and we're a CRM for them. We have our approach that we talk literally at length all over module 1 and 2 and all over our site on how we think about what keywords to go after. These are like now the conversion keywords. I'm curious to hear yours and see if there's sort of differing opinions or whatever. Like, so say you've done some of those linkable assets. How do you at the beginning think through how to prioritize the other keywords, the ones that you think will bring in buying customers?
Well, there's two different strategies. The first is I try to think about what that person would be searching for when they're not searching for CRM software. And I find a lot of people get tripped up with that because they don't do any market research and they don't know their customers. And if you don't do that, then you're toast anyway. Like, SEO is probably not going to save you, because the key with those keywords that are pain point keywords, as you call them, is they have to be things that the person searches for when they're not searching for CRM software. Because what's going to happen in a customer's life is, like, they search for, let's say, 100,000 things in their life. There's like 50,000 before and 50,000 after. There's one moment where they're going to search for exactly what you sell. And if you're only going for that, you're missing out on like most of the opportunities. The question is, what are they searching for during all those other times? It's really a question that is, you got to know your customer. You really have to know them. So to give you a real life example with Exploiting Topics, we're still sort of figuring out the customer, like who they are, what they look like. We're not even monetized, so it's really hard. But what I'm doing in the meantime is, like, what do people want who use Exploiting Topics? They want trends in different industries, like fitness trends or video game trends, or, music trends, startup trends, entertainment industry trends. And those are the keywords we're going after, because we know that those people, they may not be searching for our exact thing, but they're searching for that people that search for trends want Exploiting Topics. They just don't know yet. It's the same thing with CRM software. The small business owner is searching for something, has nothing to do with your CRM, but then when they find it, they're going to be a good fit. So the first step is to know your customers. Like, what are they searching for when they're not searching for the thing? There's no like really easy way to do that, except the couple things you can do is use Google AdWords. What I've done a couple of times for clients back in the day is, instead of guessing, I would actually bid on keywords that I wanted to rank for, and then see if they converted on landing pages. And if they did, even a little bit, you're like, okay, at least I have something here. Like, you don't have to spend a lot, because if you got one conversion, you're like, okay, at least there's something here, versus none, which is what would happen. But the difference is, with AdWords, you spent like $50 or $100 versus creating a piece of content, optimizing it, screenshots, visuals, ranking it, link building, and then they're like, oh, that's worthless. So that has also worked well for me in the past.
Yeah, for us too, that's one of the strategies we use. Is if a company has already done paid for a long time, we'll just start with the list of keywords that I've already shown to convert, knowing that if they've converted on the paid side and you can get them to rank organically, it should work the same, if not better.
So I'm curious, well, you just said that was one of the two strategies. So maybe your second one is this, but already there's an interesting, I guess, disagreement. And I say that in a positive way. That's what we want. Is that we go straight for the CRM keywords first. Because our philosophy is like, sure, we'll move to those later once we exhaust that. But like, this is fundamental. Like, we need to be ranking for the buying keywords first. Was that, I don't know if you were just assuming.
Yeah,
like,
no, sorry. Yeah, I was assuming you were talking more about like blog type of keywords.
No,
yeah,
we'll do
right.
that with the blog. So we'll produce directly
okay.
comparison keyword, like us versus Salesforce,
right.
Salesforce alternative.
Maybe it's just a disagreement in terms of where that content makes sense in the context of the site. Whereas we're creating a lot of these pages on the blog. Are you thinking about doing comparisons and, let's say, some of these category keywords like CRM software as a page on the website versus the blog?
Yeah, exactly. That's how I imagine it. I don't think it makes a big difference where you put it. I just prefer like the blog. If you're serious about building a blog, if you're just trying to rank for stuff, it's different. But if you're like, I want to build an awesome blog that people refer to, link to, you don't want to dilute it with stuff like that, in my opinion, because that content doesn't really add a lot of value to blog readers. Like, if I visit your blog and I'm like, I want like a Help Scout blog or something like that, you're like, I want to visit this, or the Moz blog or HubSpot. Like, they would never do that, because they're putting out stuff that is focused on helping people, and it has nothing to do with like the best CRM software. So I think the best place for that kind of stuff is our landing pages, just random landing pages. But I don't think it's horrible to put it on the blog. From SEO, I think it's probably better to put it on the blog because then you have some authority there from the blog going there. But if you want to build your blog as part of your brand and part of your marketing, I think that stuff hurts you more than it helps you.
Yeah,
because
really
to play devil's advocate on that, like my challenge with that is how many people are actually going to a blog and scrolling through it article by article.
No, but that's what Brian is saying.
That's the point.
Yeah, that's what Brian is saying is I think what Brian's saying to me is like the next level. So like what we do and even teach on this is like, yeah, it's like, this is a bad analogy, but we're basically saying like, we're going into these situations and people are just like floundering and they don't know the first thing about what's happening, right? Is like, nothing is converting. The blog is a total waste of time. And so we're coming in and we're like, here, like we're getting all these conversions. And Brian's saying, that's fine. You can put these conversion related topics and keyword stuff on the blog. But he's going next level and he's thinking like strategy wise. Like we're asking like, how do you start a business? And Brian's like, here's how you build company culture. Like it's like that equivalent, right? Where it's like next, like I'm assuming you have product market fit and revenue is that kind of thing. It's like he's saying, if you were to then want to build the blog into a destination, which most companies are not even there yet. They're just like, can we just show that it has some ROI, something? Like, if we're just doing nothing. You want to build into a destination, like he's talking about Moz, blog, HubSpot, then maybe you move those assets over somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree.
And you could always publish it on the blog, right? If you can always publish on the blog, a lot of teams, it's like the marketers, it's just easier for them to publish on the blog. It's a WordPress post. It's like coding wise, it's easier. And then if later you grew enough to where you wanted the blog experience to be something, you could have it to where the /blog does not include those things in a feed or in an organized stuff. And they just happen to live on a /blog URL, but it's not actually there in the reading experience. That's an easy fix in my opinion.
Yeah. And to be clear, I don't think it's going to kill your blog. Like people are going to be like, oh, this blog sucks. It's published something bad. But you got to imagine like, some people do go to blog feeds, dude. It happens. People put it in their pocket. Some people go to visit them directly. I go to blogs directly and I just see what they publish lately. And if I saw like 3 posts that were all published on the same day that were clearly some like comparison stuff, it'd be like, it wouldn't be good. But it also wouldn't be a big deal because if I'm gonna like you said, Davish, that's like you want to grow the blog as a marketing tool. Like I look at the Drift blog kind of like that. Their blog is very information focused. They have tons of comparison topics that they talk about and keywords that they target, but they're all off of the blog. They're all, separate landing pages because they really wanted to grow the blog as like a destination. I don't know. I didn't succeed to the level of Moz or HubSpot or anything like that, but that's kind of what they're going for.
What was the second thing you were going to mention? You said this was the first strategy. Do you remember in terms of the conversion related keywords, or maybe we already
no. So that in terms of if those conversion related keywords, the problem is you run out of them so quickly. Like you're saying, there's only like at best like 10, and then that's assuming that the company's comfortable doing comparisons with them and direct competitors. A lot aren't. You probably found that yourself. Like they're happy doing the best list or like some fluffy thing, but if they want to get into the weeds of like why we're better than a competitor, they're like, no, we don't want to do that. But those are good keywords, man. Those are great. Versus keywords are some of the best underrated keywords out there. And you know what's funny? There's only 2 tools I've seen that have versus keywords as a feature is Answer the Public and Uber Suggest. And they're awesome, man, because someone's searching for like the CRM software you talked about, Davish, and a competitor. Those are like the best keywords. Those people are so close to buying, or even just 2 random competitors that aren't you. If you're just starting out. Those people are so much more advanced than the how to track leads. People, those get like tons of searches, and I bet a lot of companies will go after them who are in the CRM space. But the best keyword is like Salesforce versus HubSpot. Those are amazing. They only get like 100 searches a month or 200 searches a month, but those people are your people. Like they know CRM software. So yeah, I like to really zero in on versus keywords. I've been doing a lot of that lately, and it's been working well.
One thing on that topic, we found a lot that keywords that show no search volume in any tool still drive conversions, like really long tail stuff. And that they do have search volume associated if you were to look in Search Console or anything. Have you experimented with anything like that? Or are
Yeah, I
you
have,
just
but yeah,
focusing on the high volume stuff?
no, I go all up and down the chain, because what happens is it's just like with the product keywords or the product category keywords, you run out of keywords with the high volume stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's not that many, and then there's like with Backlinko, for example, there's SEO, which is like obviously the crazy, like the hardest keyword to rank for, whatever. Then there's like keyword research, link building. Those are fairly high volume, but you run out of them really quickly. I've totally run out of those. There's none left. So I've been doing more like, I wouldn't say long tails, but more focused stuff. And the search volumes, like you said, are way off on these. Like the only problem is you only know after you publish it, because if you look at a keyword research tool and it's like, oh, it gets 0 searches a month, or let's say 10, and then you publish it and it gets 100, you only know that after you publish it. It may actually be like 5 or 1. So that's why I like Ahrefs, because at least they're going with, or Moz also uses click stream data. So at least some people are searching for it versus just pulling keywords out of thin air. But the numbers themselves are totally off. And the only way to know is to either run AdWords ads again, but then it may not be worth it for that type of keyword, or just rank for it and then see how many people actually search for it and then double down.
The suggested search as a proxy. So what Benji is thinking of, like there's one example we talk about a lot to prospective clients, not public on the blog, to not reveal detailed conversion keywords for some clients, is like, it was a client that had in a niche, it was a SaaS client, and we did a versus thing between 2 of their competitors, and then we added ourselves in. So we ranked for the 2 competitor comparison, and then we were in there as well. Showed 0 search volume in all the SEO tools that we use. And it just brings in, not forget traffic, it just brings in conversions, like lead after sign up, because it's so targeted. And it showed 0 in all of those. I don't know. And for those, what we end up doing is we use Google suggested. So we'll start typing like, Acme Corp versus, and see what else it's suggesting. And we're like, our assumption is like, well, that means some people are searching for it because Google knows to autocomplete. So
yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, if it shows it, it's a winner. Like there's no doubt about it. The other thing I've been doing, like with exploring topics, it's funny. I'm learning like all these keywords that come out. The keyword tools are months behind these fast growing keywords. Like for example, I created a SparkToro review a couple months ago on Rand Fishkin's new tool.
Yeah.
SparkToro and all the tools will show 0 searches a month. It's going to take them like 6 months to a year for it to show any volume. They're so late because they go with some like 12-month rolling average. And it's just like, for new keywords, it's just so outdated. So for your client, if he had, you had Acme was your client, and then a new competitor came out that was huge, that versus keyword isn't going to show up in a tool with volume for like a year. Meanwhile, you're killing it ranking alone. So yeah, I like to go, you can also just use like market knowledge to know what's coming out. Like to give you a good example, Google just came out with the Core Vitals experience report in the Google Search Console, which is kind of a fancy way just to measure your site speed. But it's like a new feature and everyone's searching for it. In the and that'll take about a year for it to show up in a keyword research tool. So in a year, like there's a year of opportunity before anyone even knows about it. That's why these newer keywords, especially new companies that come out, are great. So yeah, the new companies that like SparkToro or whatever, or your competitor that you talked about, your client's competitor, those are great, man. And Google suggests if it shows up there, to me, I don't even think about it. I just target it.
Are there any other tools that you're using to find some of these opportunities that are not so obvious?
Yeah, I like Answer the Public a lot. I use that.
Yeah, I've never even heard of that. What is that?
It's a free tool that focuses on questions that people ask. It's good for like exactly the type of keywords we're talking about, these long tails that don't show any volume, but people are asking questions about them online. So you can put in a keyword like CRM software and it'll show you all the questions people have based on Google Suggest and also Quora and Reddit and things like that. So that's one that I really like for these long tail stuff that we're talking about, for those niches that don't have like a lot of great keywords, but if you have one that is just, like you said, the traffic's not going to be there, but it's going to convert, it's good for finding them.
I know we're getting up to the top of the hour. Do you have 5 or 10 more minutes?
Yeah, sure.
We have some questions from our team and the community that they wanted to get through. One of them was just about featured snippets. So I know a few months back, there was some back and forth on whether you wanted a feature snippet or not. Curious on your thoughts on that now. And then secondary to that was just, do you have any suggestions on getting featured snippets?
Yeah, they're 100% worth getting. I mean, just think about it. You have do you want a result that's this big or this big? Like,
the argument against them was if it's showing like some list or whatever that you may not get clicks or people scroll past it and go to the other one. Is that could be not true?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter who's there. Like if they put a list, it's going to reduce the clicks for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're ranking or not.
It's a good point.
I mean? It's definitely true that it reduces clicks. That's why it's there actually. But would you rather be like the prominent spot or like a couple spots down? So yeah, I'm still bullish on them. And in terms of getting them, I gotta stop saying it depends, because everyone, that's the big thing in marketing now. I'm so smart. It depends. There's no answers, but there are answers.
Yeah.
So I need to come up with a different way of phrasing it, but your strategy is different depending on the featured snippet. Let's put it that way. For a list, it's really important that you have the same structure on your site for all the subheaders and about the same number of items that they want. So like if the current feature snippet has 20 items, you want to have about that. If you have 150, they're not going to show it. Or if you have 10, they're probably not going to show it. For definitions, the number one thing I've found, a little trick, is for the definition words, you're always like, content marketing is blah, 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 which is how you want to phrase it. You want it to be super objective, like a Wikipedia entry, because they don't want to show it's a featured snippet. It's Google's answer. Like you have to understand, where marketing people, we see Google as like, we know what a featured snippet is. My mom, when she searches for something, she's like, Google told me like this thing. So they want to make sure it's right. And they want objective stuff. They don't want your opinion in there. So, content marketing is a great strategy. You're toast. You're never going to get in. One little trick, I don't know why this works, is what I do is I always put, the content marketing, and then parentheses I put AKA blank and blank is blah, blah, blah. And for some reason, by including some other synonyms or other ways it's phrased online, it helps you get there. I don't know why. I've noticed this pattern a bunch of times. I do it for all my featured snippets when it makes sense. So yeah, if you can do that, that can help you get in the definition. And those are the two big ones. There's recipe featured snippets, some others, but those are the biggest two.
How do you think about defending number one positions? Is there constant upkeep that you do to your blog posts or anything special?
I usually just wait for it to not be number one. I don't do anything proactive because first of all, you can do more harm than good. And you don't know the score. Like let's say, it's a scoring system on the first page. You don't know if you're ahead by like 20 points or 1 point, and if you're ahead by 20 points, you probably want to take your foot off the gas and just enjoy it and work on other stuff. But if it's 1 point, then you should double down. But the problem is you don't know. And let's say you go from number one to number two. Well, if you're 1 point behind them, it's pretty easy to get that point back. And I rather wait until it happens and then react than try to just like lap the person a bunch of times.
On that topic too, if your blog post moves from like, let's say number one position to number 2 or 3, is there a certain time period that you'll give it before you start making changes? Because sometimes I've seen that just Google tests different articles in different places. So just curious on your thinking there.
Yeah, usually give it a couple weeks. It's
and if it stays down, then do something about it.
Yeah, that's the spot now. Like if it's 1 to 3 the next day, you're like, well, I'm still basically number one. This could be a test. It could be an update as updates roll out. I've seen this since back in the day. During an update, it's like bizarro world. The lower ranked sites rank higher and the others rank lower. And then it all evens out at the end. So you could just be seeing that. And you don't know, so it doesn't make sense to change anything. Yeah, so I usually wait about a week or 2 before making any changes.
Interesting. That's interesting. We if that's true, we are definitely overreacting if there's an update, we're sometimes like, oh my God, what's happening to our client results? And we just maybe need to wait until it settles.
Well, it's easy for me to say because it's my own site. I don't have a client calling me being like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
So it's easy for me to say. But yeah, the best advice with SEO, like a surprising amount of time, is to do nothing and to just let it ride and see what happens. Because I've had so many instances where I've spent like a week fretting, worried, stressed out, and then it just goes back to where it was. It was Google doing some crazy stuff.
Right.
So yeah, I still live and die by rankings, don't get me wrong, but I don't freak out as much about a spot. Like, to give you a good example, I was recently ranking I was number 2 for keyword research for like years. And then last week went down to number 4. And I've been there for about a week. And now I'm kind of like, now is the time I should probably like do something, because it seems to be like my new spot. And I don't want, it's important keywords. So this is the
What would
time
you
I'm just
do
going to start paying
in that
attention.
situation? And what kind of stuff are you thinking of? Is it like link building or?
No, in that case, it actually has more links than some of the, it has lower domain authority because it's like Moz, HubSpot, Ahrefs. But it has lower domain authority, but the page itself has more links. The number one thing I look at is search intent and be like, what? Because something in Google's infinite wisdom is saying that this isn't a good match. Like, people want this stuff more than yours. And I have to be honest with myself and look at this and be like, what is it? Is it the formatting? Is it optimized for, the devices people are using when they search for it, which is mostly desktop in my case, but maybe for some reason it's mobile. Is there out of date stuff in there? Are there out of date screenshots? Is it the fact that there's like literally 1,000 comments on the post and maybe it's just like overwhelming and doesn't really add any value? So I try to go through that little checklist, is like empathetically think, what is it? Like, what's better about this? And I noticed some things right away. Like, the pages above me, a lot of them get into what it is right away a little bit faster, because this is a definitive guide with like illustrations and a bunch of doodads and whatnot. So I think maybe like a more straightforward thing. And what you can do is test it easily. Like, what I plan on doing, if it stays that way, is rolling out basically the same content as a traditional blog post. That way it loads faster, it's cleaner, it's easier to like sift through, and seeing how it goes. And if it doesn't work, I can just easily roll back to the guide. It's just like one
Wow,
click.
that's really interesting. Is that you're basically viewing Google. God, this makes me so self-conscious that I'm stuck in like 1995 SEO in a way. Is that you're viewing Google in a very human way. Like, you're saying what however the hell this algorithm works, it's smart enough to detect these differences. Like, it'll detect whether, I don't know, like you said, like, I'm discussing keyword research too far below because I'm formatting like XYZ and have some images here or whatever.
Well, it's more that they're reacting to users. Like, it's their conduit from, like, users are reacting and the algorithm's taking that into account.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So
It's not really Google
going back
smart.
to the SERP or via bouncing, whatever.
Exactly. All that stuff. They must be landing on mine, being like, huge image, lot of chapters. I'm just searching for keyword research. I don't really even know what it is.
Yeah.
Versus HubSpot, which is like, oh, right into it. Boom. Here's what it is. Here's a basic guide. Another thing I noticed that I didn't do in mine is that the ones above me are all how-to related keywords, or they focus more on the how-to aspect.
Yeah.
So I don't do that. I don't have a how-to. Mine's chapters. The other thing I noticed, a lot of them talk about beginners. Mine's really more advanced. So if I'm new to it, I'm like, the top 2 are beginners and I'm right behind them. So maybe I'm too advanced in a beginner, which keyword research is kind of a beginner keyword. I'm not really the best search intent. These aren't necessarily things I would like just change right away. But as I look at it, I'm just doing my like thought process out loud of how I would look at mine and being like, what is it? It's not Google, hating me. It's probably not a links issue in this case. Someone searching for keyword research is landing on that page is just showing there, and it's just, look how fast they get into what is keyword research. It's above the fold.
Right.
Versus mine, which is underneath this, like, it's a cool image, but I mean,
yeah, it's so challenging because when you're speaking to an advanced audience, you don't necessarily want to do the how-to or the what is keyword research.
Right. Like, I get into it somewhat early, but if you compare it to HubSpot, it's way down the page. And if that's the user intent is that, then it's not a good match. And I don't do a how-to right after. I have like, a section on tools, a section on blog. It's more of like a course style, a guide style. So that just may not be a good fit for that keyword. The thing was funny. It's been ranking for a while. So Google's maybe got more sophisticated with measuring that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that's something analogous to what we're doing is like, going back to that concussion client, just because it was top of mind, is like we feel really confident waiting, like you said, when we see a post and we talk to the content strategist of that client and they're like, guys, like, don't worry, just hang on, because I've gone through every single one of the other 10 results and they're trash. And like and ours is just so much more in depth. Ours is so much better. Like, it's guaranteedly better. And then you wait and it's better. But like, I think the meta strategy of what Brian's saying that I think behooves everyone to pay attention to is like the level of depth that you're thinking about the user experience. Because like, at least from our client experience and even people in the courses, they're viewing this in a very like, I hate to use this, but like a transactional way of just like, what should I rank for? I published this post. What's the next one? Like, and it's just like, I covered these topics, like I did this, like, why isn't this working? What's happening? Whereas you're like carefully being like, not offended, but you're like, okay, like there's something here I don't know. What is it? How do I genuinely make this as useful as possible, tied all around the intent behind the user? That feels good to me in the sense that is very like honest marketing, in that like, you're not trying to hack anything. You're not like, I've learned that Google does this thing, so I'm going to do this hack and like put this keyword here. You're just like, you're literally aligning yourself to the purpose of Google's search engine itself, which is just like, so what do you want when you type this in? Like, what are you asking for to the searcher? And then you're trying to fulfill that. That, I think, if you just do that, regardless of the details of how you do it, you're in a good spot, in my opinion. Like, Benji, when you think about it, that's a core part of our content strategy of what we do in the agency and what we're telling everyone else to do.
Yeah, exactly. Any last interesting things that you've been thinking about lately, or experiments that you've run that you're surprised by?
Yeah, a couple months ago, I ran a page speed experiment that was kind of interesting, where I took one of the slowest pages at Backlinko, which was like great, it had tons of high-res images that were improperly formatted and sized, tons of comments, embedded videos, and sped it up and made it like literally 30 times faster by removing all the images, basically taking off of WordPress and making like a static page so it loaded really quickly. And everything else was the same, like the actual content, the title tag, description tag, all that stuff. And the rankings didn't change at all. And what's interesting was that not only did it not change, but the user experience was completely different in Google Analytics. So, which may have canceled each other out. So to give you an idea, the bounce rate on the faster page was a lot better. I think because the page loaded a lot faster and they could get right into it right away. But the time on site was worse because there was not a lot there. It lacked a lot of the visuals that helped you understand what was going on. So even though like the user experience signals were totally different, I think those two things basically cancel each other out, and the page speed itself didn't make any difference at all. I'm going to do a much bigger version of the experiment. Right now, we're moving Backlinko over to Next.js, and the site speed improvements are like crazy. Like, it's going to go from a slow site to a fast site, basically. And that'll be interesting because that's an entire site. So every variable is controlled for. And we'll see if that makes any difference in the rankings, to go from, let's say, a page speed score in Google Page Speed Insights of like 12 or 15, where most of the pages are, to like 80. And if that doesn't make a difference, I think that'll really show that page speed may not be a huge ranking factor.
That's really interesting. I think we'll end it there. That was really interesting.
Yeah,
and
thanks so
thank
much.
you so much again for your time.
No problem, guys. Good talking to you.